We have quite the segment ahead of us. I want to start with an absolutely ruthless ad against Trump, and it frames the thinking about him in a way that I haven't spent much time considering, and it's powerful. And then we'll get into some bombshell news that just obliterates MAGA and Trump's narrative, one of their most prominent ones lately. And then I'll play another video that mocks Trump. So lots to go through. First, here's the Lincoln Project saying, essentially, MAGA, voters of Trump, how are you going to explain that decision to your children?
What will you tell your kids? That you voted for a felon and a criminal, supported a man found guilty by a citizen jury, went into the voting booth happy to pull the lever for the only former president in history to bear the mark of criminal shame. Will you tell them that breaking the law is how they should live their lives? That lying to their families about porn stars and hush money is how they should behave? Do you want your son to treat women like a man who was found to have committed sexual assault? Do you want your daughter to be a victim of a man like him?
You going up the escalator? I'm going to be dating her in 10 years. Can you believe it?
And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the...
Will you tell them that he was honest, that he was a good man,
Very fine people on both sides.
that he treated people the way you've taught them?
Like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
Will you tell them you're proud of his cruelty, happy with the ugly insults,
I mean, I'd look her right in that fat, ugly face of hers.
the attacks on women, and the endless lies, that the chaos, death, and danger he brought was worth it? We know it's hard to walk away and put country over party, but your kids are watching.
If you're already subscribed to this channel, thank you so much for sitting through these subscribe plugs every day. The reason it's so important is because nearly 70% of the people who watch the show aren't subscribed. And that would make a huge difference if all of you would just click that subscribe button. It's free, it's easy, but it makes a huge difference. Back to the video.
You're not just voting for your future, you're voting for theirs.
Wow. Again, credit to the Lincoln Project, and absolutely on the nose. And I will say, whenever I enter into political conversations and I'm trying to convince someone to understand and then act accordingly, the existential nature of this election, the stakes of this election, and voting against Trump is ultimately what I want them to do. And when I have those conversations, I start with the threat he poses to democracy, the most consequential thing, and go through how he tried to block the peaceful transfer of power. So that's sort of his record, then looking ahead and his authoritarian intentions. So that's super important, but I haven't spent as much time on, even though I think it does compel people, hopefully, framing it that way, which is, think about just setting aside some of the more existential characteristics of this election that we could talk about. Look at the character of this man. This is who you want to be the most powerful person in the world. And then how are you going to explain that to your children? This is the person that you put your support behind, again, to lead our country, just on his character, not to mention his past governance and his intentions for future governance. And so that's very compelling to me and powerful. And then on the convicted felon part of it, you know, the response from MAGA, if they saw this ad, would be, well, I can explain that to my children. It's rigged. And if we see more convictions, those are rigged too, because the entire justice system is rigged against Trump. Biden's pulling the strings in all these different jurisdictions and all these different ways. And he is weaponizing, whether it be the DOJ or just the justice system at large, against Trump. And he's protecting Democrats. He's serving his own, you know where this is going. He's serving his own interest, and he's weaponizing against his political enemy. Interesting. Here's this from CNN. A federal jury has convicted Hunter Biden on all 3 federal felony gun charges he faced, concluding that he violated laws meant to prevent drug addicts from owning firearms. The conviction marks the first time a president's immediate family member has been found guilty of a crime during their father's term in office, though his crimes predate Joe Biden's tenure as president. The jury, which deliberated for just under 3 hours, that's quick, returned guilty verdicts on all 3 charges, which stemmed from a revolver Hunter Biden bought in October 2018 at a Delaware gun shop. The first 2 counts were for lying about his drug use on a federal background check form, and the third count was for possessing a gun while addicted to or using illegal drugs. Hunter Biden could face up to 25 years in prison and a fine of up to $750,000 in sentencing, just to give you a sense of the gravity of this conviction, though he likely will receive far less than the maximum as a first-time offender. And as we've been talking about before this conviction came down, while we understand the gravity and how unfortunate this is for Hunter and his family, we, and I'm referring to people who want Joe Biden to be reelected, we also can simultaneously say, and we respect the process as it's played out. We respect our justice system enough to understand a jury of Hunter Biden's peers examined evidence and came to this conclusion based on the trial and due process played out and all of it, and we respect our justice system. And so this is legal accountability for Hunter Biden's actions. Why can't MAGA do that when it's someone on their side? And why can't they have a little bit of a moment of introspection and thinking, wait a minute, Joe Biden's son is now a convicted felon because of Joe Biden's DOJ? Are we wrong, maybe? Maybe he's not pulling all the strings. Maybe he is really letting his DOJ act independently and definitely letting the Manhattan DA act independently. Now, interestingly, a friend texted me this morning, and this is a very relatable feeling. Bro, the rage I feel right now about MAGA doubling down on a claim that Biden's DOJ is corrupt. And they're doubling down. That's what they're doing. And I want to remind you, to give you a sense of how absurd it must be to double down, what we were hearing before. The quickest way I could think of finding this clip was just grabbing it in the coverage I did. So here's Don Jr.
Sort of all kind of a big deal. Do I think Hunter will be convicted? I doubt it. They're going to drag it out till after the election, and then he'll be pardoned regardless of what happens. But again, he's being looked at by Biden's DOJ. So let's not pretend for 1 second that there are that they're going to be above board on that.
Let's not act for 1 second like they're going to be above board on that. There's not going to be a conviction, and Biden will pardon him even if there is. Biden's committed that he's not going to pardon Hunter, and Hunter was convicted. I said in that segment that Don Jr., we know, won't come out and say, oh, I was wrong. Let's have a little bit of a conversation here on the Triggered Don Jr. podcast, as it's called, and talk about where we went wrong, if this is such a violation of our narrative. And maybe those crazy liberals have something right. Maybe they're actually being logically consistent on this issue in recognizing the legitimacy of our justice system and not abandoning our dedication to it just because a guy on our side has some legal accountability. So there's that. We'll talk about that probably multiple times throughout today. It's a big news item, and you see MAGA bending over backwards to fit the pieces together, as they've done with Bob Menendez too and Henry Cuellar. And it's proof that this isn't them examining evidence and then coming to a conclusion about what's a logical narrative. It's just picking the narrative first that feels the best emotionally and then trying desperately to find facts that align with that. But one of the things that we've been hearing is that the American people, they understand the unfairness of Trump's conviction, and that's why he's going to surge in the polls, and he's going to do even better in this election because America will reward him for being such a victim. Well, it doesn't seem to be playing out that way. ABC News reports 2 other polls found that the verdict has made a small but significant share of potential Trump supporters less likely to vote for him. According to Ipsos Reuters, 10% of Republican registered voters said they were less likely to support Trump after the conviction. Harris x Forbes put that number at 11%. Similarly, 25% of independents said they were less likely to vote for Trump in the Ipsos Reuters poll, and 28% of independents said so in the Harris Forbes poll. And we also talked about that poll that was around 50% of independents saying that Trump should drop out altogether, which could be devastating for him. And by the way, 538, not their polling, but their projection and sort of the probability of who's going to win based on a number of different factors. They do simulations, again, based on these different metrics. And of 100 simulations, Biden wins 53 times out of 100, while Trump wins 47 times out of 100. So Biden is favored to win. And we might dive more into the reasons that are given as to why on the bonus show. You can get access to a whole extra episode of the show every day by clicking that join button below. And with that being said, let's watch a Republican voters against Trump video that was really clever and interesting, which is, could Trump get hired at a mall, much less as president of the United States?
I was wondering if you guys are hiring right now. I was thinking about applying for a job. I was thinking about applying for a job here. I'm currently facing 88 felonies. For detention of classified information. Do you all take people that have been found liable for sexual assault, trying to overturn the 2020 election, falsifying business records? I was wondering if that was going to be a problem.
I think working with diamonds and jewelry. They're going to do a background check.
Yeah.
So that's the only.
So probably not.
Yeah.
So do you guys hire people that sexually assault other people, or?
We run a phone background. It won't go through. No, we don't. I don't think so.
Okay.
Donald Trump has been charged with 88 felonies and found liable for sexual assault. If Trump is too big of a liability to get a job at your local mall, he is too big of a liability to be president of the United States. Republican Accountability PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
And I could not have said it better myself, so I'll leave it on that. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments.